So you were at Disney World of all places.
Yeah.
You were with your 4 children, and you got the call no one wants.
The call no one
The
wants.
call no one wants, that
Yeah.
Bob was gravely injured. He then spent, sorry, I'm emotional about these
Yeah,
things
no,
for you, for
I mean-
everyone. He spent 36 days in a medically induced coma, which had to have been just horrific to live through, right? The uncertainty. How did you endure those 30? Let's start at the beginning. How do you endure those 36 days?
Wow. Well,
Because, sorry, one thing. I know that it's not 36 days. It's 36 years
Yeah,
because
it
every
is.
day. It
It
sounds
is.
short, not if you've lived something like
No.
this. So it must have been just forever.
And time has no meaning, does
Yeah,
it,
that's
in
right.
an ICU? You're in this altered state. And I think you called it the void, maybe in your book, and we called it the vortex. Like in the vortex, nothing else mattered other than what would happen to him. And the prognosis was grim. I was basically given, the number one, he might not live. And number two, be prepared, have a plan B, which is what we called it, because he, probably won't ever be able to work, talk. He was, they were talking about acute care nursing homes. And I stayed in this world of hope. It was later, so later gives you this
Were you
perspective.
able to be hopeful that whole time?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. I did not choose to go on Google and look at what a traumatic brain injury was. I knew that I would never sleep again. I let everybody around me sort of talk to the doctors. I didn't want to look at the scans. There were rocks all over his, in his head. They'd cut his skull off. There was a rock right on his carotid artery that they didn't know how they were going to get out. I just didn't want to look, didn't want to see. I just thought if I just keep showing up and looking for those little things, and you talk about that too so beautifully in option B, the little moments where you just tell yourself that I'm just going to be present, because if I toggle forward, it's frightening, and if I toggle backward, it's so sad.
Right. So his recovery was a miracle for your family, but it was also long and grueling, and it was a very long road to regain speech, regain movement, and put you in a caregiver role I think neither one of you expected. The title of my book comes from my friend Phil, who said option A is not available, so we're just going to kick this shit out of option B. And this had to have been a complete option B for you. How did you and Bob learn to find your way through and accept the reality and make the most of it?
Stories are so powerful, and it's what you did with your book, and it's what we did. It was someone who was asking me earlier, how did this book come about? As a writer, I just needed to start making sense of this. I didn't know if he would live, so I wanted to write what would happen for the kids. And then if he did live, I knew as a journalist he would have 1,000 questions, and I wouldn't remember anything that happened. So I just started writing. And one of his neurosurgeon, whom I loved, it's all about bedside manner, and he said, hey, you're a writer. Somebody needs to write a book about this, because thousands of these service members are coming through these military hospitals, and nobody in America has any idea that this is happening, that these injuries are happening. These guys would have been dead 10 years ago in another war. He said, you need to write about this. And that stuck in my head, because you can't rewind the tape, right? But if you can take the bad thing and do something good with it, if you can use your story, as you did, to maybe ease the way for someone else. I wanted to say something earlier that I didn't, and it was hindsight that I realized there were 4 things. You asked me how did I get through those 36 days, and even in the year beyond, because he woke up, and he woke up in this really beautiful, sweet way, telling everybody that they were beautiful, but he was missing all of his words. So he had to slowly learn all that again. And I realized there were sort of 4 legs of my stool, and they all started with F. There is a 5th F, as some people have told me, but we're not going to talk about that one today. And it was easy. It was family, friends, faith, and funny. And in different percentages.
Oh, those are so great.
The 4 Fs, right? So different days, different hours, different things. And you talk about humor in getting you through, and ultimately you were in a place. We used it all the time. Gallows humor, laughing at, everything.
It is amazing. So writing was maybe I'm a writer, I don't know.
You're a good writer.
I don't write full-time professionally, but I think Lean In kind of made me a writer. I learned that I love to write, but then for me too, I sat down and wrote my journal. And it is, you start the process of writing for yourself. So writing was clearly so amazing for your recovery. And I love the idea that you were documenting for Bob.
Yeah.
When did it shift and the writing became for the book?
Boy, I had an 800-page document when I finished, and then people knew I was
You
a
must
writer.
have cut down a little.
Yeah, well, there's a second book, and I'm going to give that to you. It's right over there. someone, approached us and said, would you ever want to do a book? And I still had the neurosurgeon's words in my head. And I thought, well, I have this 800-page document. When you're in a brain injury, they tell you to just talk to them. So I went back and I told all the stories. We started our marriage in Beijing, China. I would just tell him the stories of our life. And somewhere in there, his brain was rebooting. And so this 800-page document was the story of our life, the story of our love, and the story of our healing. And that sort of became that.
I love the stools. Those stools are really the
Those 4
same thing,
legs.
right? So family, friends, faith, and funny.
And funny, people looked at us sometimes. My girlfriend, Melanie Bloom, was married to David Bloom. He was the NBC reporter who died in Iraq. So when he died, I became that friend that you write about in your book, just there, figuring out all the things for her, from the patent leather shoes for her 3 girls to wear to the funeral. And I was there when she broke the news to him, which you write about as well. And,
When she broke the news
to her children.
to her children.
Yeah,
Ah,
and when I read that part in your book, my heart,
Put back.
Yeah, but so we would show up, we would get invited to a party somewhere, and we would be like, okay, we're the 2 people you want at your holiday party. We got death and dismemberment here. Like,
So
aren't we a ball?
So let's talk about this. What is your advice? So you were the friend who showed up and you understood. And one of the things we talked about before we went live, there are moments before these shows, was that in some ways, sometimes when there's injury, not death, it can be harder because, people will say to me, Sunday is Father's Day. People know I'm missing Dave, and many people will remember, hey, it's Father's Day. Are you okay? But when the person's still alive, they don't know exactly what to say. So what advice do you have for friends and family? Do you think people should address it, should not address it?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And before I answer that too, I was jealous of Mel. I know that's going to sound really funny. David was dead. So she went to the lowest place that she could go, and all she had was to come back. And I call it bounce. People call it resilience, but she needed to find a way to bounce. I didn't know what my life would be like with Bob if he didn't wake up and my kids were visiting 4 kids in a nursing facility for the rest of their life. I wanted to be her at times. I know that sounds really crazy.
No, it doesn't. If someone's in a medically induced coma and never going, I did so much research for my book. So many people said that there are times when death is a relief, when someone is in sick or in pain. So,
Right.
And I think one of the things is self-compassion. So no, you're allowed to think anything, and you shouldn't blame yourself, nor should anyone blame you.
Yeah.
Self-compassion with this kind of injury. So what is your advice for friends and family to address it head
Own it.
on?
Own it. But
Speak up.
empathize, don't sympathize. I, like you, did not want to be that woman in the grocery store that, oh, that poor woman. I didn't want anyone's pity, but I wanted people to say, that sucks. What happened to you, that sucks. And I'm here. And once you give somebody permission to say that, then the floodgates open.
They do it. So let's talk about the other 2 pillars, faith.
Yeah.
How did your faith help you?
Boy, I was really pissed off at God. I mean, Bob and I were both raised in a Christian faith, and we don't wear a religion on our sleeves. But I think when you're given a faith, what a time to use it, right? It's a time to ignite that belief, because there are just things that are bigger than us. And I've seen that in hospitals. I've talked to many other families. Miracles happen, and I wanted to believe in a miracle, and I didn't want any physician or anybody out there to tell me I couldn't until I was ready to come to terms with what had happened. So faith in different ways, and that means all different things for different people, but I have seen soldiers in hospitals who don't believe, but I've watched that nurse hold it for them and say, maybe you don't feel like talking to God today. I remember, never forget, this one soldier came in, this young man, and had his leg blown off, and he was a dancer. He loved to dance. And she said, well, honey, I talked to God for you today, and I'm just here to tell you he's got your back. And maybe if you can do that for somebody in their lowest moments, faith is all different things.
That's an amazing thought. That it's not just you keeping faith, because there are moments you can't. My brother-in-law said he's still not on speaking terms with God, right?
I was pissed off.
You can hold off. So you guys started a foundation. You met so many families of service members, and you talk about the hidden injuries, the PTSD, the brain traumatic, the depression. So what does the Bob Woodruff Foundation do?
We took the crazy amount of attention we got for our story. We raised money, and we look at the whole landscape. There are 46,000 nonprofits that help vets. It's really hard to navigate. And we take those funds and we make grants with many strings attached to those organizations that are working in the areas of working with caregivers. I'm passionate about that because it's the whole family that needs to recover, not just the individual. In areas of reemployment and getting people ready to go back to work. And then certainly in post-traumatic stress and in mental health, because that's huge right now. So we put people together, we convene people, we've created this framework where we need to put everybody together, and that's a technology solution as well. All of the resources out there are so hard for these families to access.
And so you're helping them. That's
Yeah.
great.